An alien girl was stuck in a wheelchair for 12 years until an Earth guy gave her robotic legs and married her. An alien girl, confined to a wheelchair for 12 years, finds new life when an Earth guy crafts her robotic legs and wins her heart in marriage. What would it feel like if you, after years of limitation, were given the chance to walk again, and found love in the process? Today, I, your storyteller from the Sci-Fi Nebula channel, will take you into the vast, thrilling world of Nova Crucible, a tale of resilience, innovation, and unexpected bonds. Stick around until the end, because the most jaw-dropping twist will leave you speechless. Before we dive into the story, please drop a like and hit that subscribe button to help our channel reach 1,000 subscribers soon. Your support fuels our passion to bring you more captivating tales. And here's a little nudge: if there's a topic you'd love us to explore next, leave a comment below, or simply type 1 if you're hooked, or 0 if you think we could tweak something. Now, let's blast off into the boundless expanse of the universe. Chapter 1: Cold Winds over the Scrapyard. Beneath the blazing red glow of twin suns, the Nova Crucible Scrapyard stretched out like a shattered sea of metal. The hulking carcasses of once mighty starships, relics of distant civilizations, lay scattered across the black sand, rusted and twisted under the weight of forgotten years. A cold wind howled through the wreckage, carrying the sharp tang of scorched steel and dry dust, a mournful song of abandonment. Mal Reynolds stood amidst it all, his worn boots crusted with sand, cradling a damaged power core in his hands, a small, frigid chunk of metal that, to him, shimmered with untapped potential. Mal wasn't tall or imposing, nor did he carry the polished air of a corporate engineer. His weathered leather jacket clung to a lean frame, his tousled brown hair whipped about by the wind, and his gray eyes glinted with a mix of mischief and weariness. At 35, he looked like a man who'd weathered a decade of war, not against alien foes, but against the system that had cast him aside. The Nova Crucible wasn't just his livelihood, it was his home, a chaotic sanctuary where he found freedom among the discarded. He held the power core up to the fading light, inspecting the hairline cracks on its surface. "If I can fix you," he muttered, his breath forming a faint mist in the chill air, "you'll be worth a whole ship. Or at least a few decent meals." He smirked, but the grin faded as a strange sound cut through the wind, a soft hum, distinct from the usual clatter of metal or the gusts sweeping the yard. Mal turned, his hand instinctively brushing the multi-tool in his pocket. From the shadows between two wrecked hulls, a figure emerged. A sleek hoverchair glided silently over the sand, its propulsion system casting a faint blue glow. The occupant wasn't human, not entirely. Her skin shimmered a silvery green, catching the dying sunlight like the hull of a pristine ship, and her long, metallic white hair flowed past her shoulders, dancing lightly in the breeze. Her deep black eyes fixed on Mal, unblinking, radiating a cold pride. She wore a fitted black tunic that bared her slender yet sturdy shoulders, hinting at a body once honed for hard labor before it was tethered to that chair. "This isn't a place for stragglers after hours," her voice rang out, clear as a bell but edged with frost. It carried an otherworldly resonance, a hallmark of the Zorani, a species renowned for their engineering prowess across the galaxy before human corporations muscled in. Mal's lips curled into his signature half-smile. "Then I'd say we're both breaking the rules, friend. Name's Mal Reynolds, resident wanderer of this dump." He took a step closer, still clutching the power core, his gaze sweeping over her without a hint of hesitation. "And you are? Besides the prettiest thing I've seen in this junk heap." She tilted her head, eyes narrowing as if sizing him up. "Ellen Ripley," she replied, her tone flat. "New inventory specialist at Nova Crucible. And I'm not here for cheap flattery from a scrap scavenger." "I don't scavenge," Mal shot back, a touch of pride in his voice. "I resurrect. There's a difference." He gestured to the core in his hand. "This used to power a starship. Now it just needs a little love to hum again." He stepped nearer, catching the faint whine from her hoverchair. "Like that chair of yours. The propulsion's straining, hear it?" Ellen frowned, her fingers tightening on the armrests. It's standard issue from the Galactic Health Alliance, she said, her voice stiffening. It doesn't need fixing by some drifter. But Mal wasn't listening. He dropped to one knee beside the chair, pulling out his multi-tool and prying open the propulsion casing before she could protest. Standard or not, it's overheating. Misaligned coils, obvious as the nose on my face. Give me 5 minutes. His hands moved with swift precision, fingers dancing over the machinery with the ease of someone who'd lived among it his whole life. Ellen fell silent, her eyes tracking his every motion. There was something in the way he worked, not the carelessness of a scavenger, but the dedication of a true engineer, that kept her from stopping him. The chair's whine softened, replaced by a smooth, steady hum. Mal stood, brushing his hands on his jacket, a smug grin spreading across his face. Done. Runs lighter now, saves about 20% on power. Thank me later. Ellen tested the chair's movement, her eyes widening as she felt the difference. How did you? She trailed off, her voice softening, as if reluctant to admit he'd been right. Then she looked up, meeting his gaze. You're not like the others I've met here. Mal shrugged. Used to work for Weyland-Yutani, if you're curious. Senior engineer, good pay, fancy uniform. Till I opened my mouth about how they cut safety corners for profit. They kicked me to the curb, called me a troublemaker. Now I'm here, living my way. He paused, his eyes drifting to her chair. What about you? That chair's not something you pick for fun. What happened? Ellen turned her face away, the second sun's red light casting sharp shadows across her cheekbones. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the wind whistling through the wreckage. Finally, she spoke, her voice low, almost a whisper. I was an engineer, like you. Worked for Weyland-Yutani on a terraforming project. The atmospheric compressor failed, no one checked it, no one cared. It blew, killed 3 of my team. I was the only survivor, but my legs, her grip tightened on the armrests, nails scraping faintly against the metal. 12 years, 4 months, 19 days. I've counted every one. Mal felt a slow burn of anger flare in his chest. He knew Weyland-Yutani all too well, the kind of outfit that valued credits over lives, the same one that had driven him to this fringe existence. But looking at Ellen, he saw more than injustice, he saw a woman of strength, trapped in a body that no longer obeyed her. They don't deserve you counting the days, he said, his voice low but firm. You deserve better than that chair. Ellen let out a dry, bitter laugh. Better? Medical tech says Zorani neural patterns are too complex to regenerate. They gave me this chair and told me to be grateful. Mal tilted his head, a spark of something wild igniting in his eyes. He stepped closer, his voice dropping with excitement. I'm not talking standard medical tech. I'm talking what I can do. Out of this scrap, I could build you legs, robotic ones, with a neural interface. Dangerous, maybe illegal, but it'd give you freedom. Ellen stared at him, her black eyes flickering with doubt and a trace of curiosity. You're insane, she said, but the chill in her tone had thawed. Why would you do that for me? You don't even know me. Mal shrugged, his grin returning. Because I hate seeing good things go to waste. And because I can. He extended a hand, a gesture both friendly and daring. Come with me to my workshop. I'll show you. Ellen stayed silent, her hands resting on the chair. The wind kicked up, swirling sand and clinking metal in the distance. At last, she nodded, a slight, almost imperceptible dip of her chin. Fine, Mal Reynolds. But if you waste my time, I'll dismantle this chair myself and throw it at you. Mal laughed, the sound echoing through the scrapyard. Deal. He turned, striding toward the faint glow of his workshop in the distance, Ellen gliding quietly behind him. Beneath the twin suns sinking into the horizon, 2 figures, a rebellious human and a resilient Zorani, began a journey neither could yet fathom. But in that moment, amid the chaos of Nova Crucible, they were no longer alone. Chapter 2, Green Light in the Workshop. The workshop crouched at the edge of the Nova Crucible scrapyard like a forgotten sentinel, its rusted shell a converted cargo container glowing faintly under strips of plasma lighting. The twin suns had dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a bruised purple streaked with stars, but inside, a soft green radiance bathed everything in an ethereal shimmer. Mal Reynolds pushed open the heavy door, its hinges groaning in protest, and gestured for Ellen Ripley to follow. Her hoverchair hummed as it glided over the threshold, the blue glow of its propulsion system mingling with the workshop's light, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The space was a chaotic symphony of machinery and ingenuity. Tools littered a workbench scarred from years of use, while holographic diagrams floated in the air, spinning schematics of engines, circuits, and stranger devices salvaged from a dozen alien wrecks. Stacks of metal plates and coils leaned precariously against one wall, and a faint hum of power pulsed from a generator tucked in the corner. To an outsider, it might look like madness, but to Mal, it was order, a haven where broken things found new life. Ellen maneuvered her chair through the clutter, her metallic white hair catching the green light like a cascade of starfire. She paused near a wall covered in hand-drawn sketches, her black eyes narrowing as she studied them. "This isn't what I expected," she admitted, her voice softer than it had been in the scrapyard. "I pictured a grimy chop shop, parts strewn everywhere." Mal grinned, clearing a space on the workbench with a sweep of his arm. "I work with junk, not in it. There's a difference." He tapped a holographic display, bringing up a new image, a pair of sleek robotic legs, their chrome and matte black components outlined in glowing lines. "Take a look at this. Been tinkering with it for a while, but it's got your name on it now." Ellen leaned closer, her expression unreadable as she examined the design. "Neural interface schematics," she said, her tone shifting to one of professional curiosity. "You're not just a scavenger, are you?" "Never was," Mal replied, his fingers brushing through his tousled hair as he expanded the hologram. "The trick isn't the mechanics, those are easy. It's linking them to your nervous system. Zorani neural patterns are complex, right? Standard tech can't keep up. But this," he pointed to a small, pulsing component in the design. "This is a quantum core, salvaged from a crashed Kree ship. It adapts to any neural signal, rewrites itself on the fly. Outside-the-box thinking." Ellen's gaze lingered on the hologram, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on her chair's armrest. "The doctors said neural integration was impossible for my species," she murmured. "Something about synaptic density. They tried, back when it happened, but gave up fast." Her voice tightened, a crack in her icy facade. Mal leaned against the workbench, crossing his arms. "No pressure, but if you want to tell me what happened, it might help. Customization's all about the details." His tone was gentle, not pushing, just offering, a rare softness from a man who usually hid behind smirks and bravado. Ellen's eyes drifted to the floor, the green light casting faint reflections on her silvery skin. For a moment, she was still, the only sound the low hum of the workshop's machinery. Then she took a deep breath, as if steeling herself. It wasn't dramatic, no epic battle or noble sacrifice. Just corporate negligence. "I was a junior engineer on a Weyland-Yutani terraforming rig. The atmospheric processors weren't shielded properly, cost-cutting, they called it. When they overloaded, the gravitational surge," she paused, her hands clenching. "It crushed my lower body. Killed 3 others instantly. I survived, barely. The company's lawyers said it was experimental tech, so they weren't liable. The settlement didn't even cover half my medical bills." Mal's jaw tightened, his gray eyes darkening with a familiar fury. "Bastards," he muttered, the word sharp as a blade. "The universe isn't fair, Ellen. I've seen it chew up good people and spit them out while the suits walk away clean." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "But that doesn't mean we can't tip the scales a little." Their eyes met, and something electric sparked in the air, a shared recognition of pain, of defiance. Ellen broke the gaze first, her skin flushing a deeper green. "So," she said, her voice husky, "tell me your story. How does a human end up running an illegal tech shop on a frontier dump like this?" Mal leaned back, a sharp smile tugging at his lips. "Would you believe I was a corporate compliance officer? Following rules, wearing ties, the whole deal. I was good at it, too good. Started seeing patterns in the accident reports, same corners cut, same executives dodging blame while workers paid the price. Tried to do it the right way, filed complaints, gathered evidence. Got myself fired and blacklisted for it." He gestured around the workshop. "So I decided to help people my way. Fixing what's broken, giving back what the system takes." Ellen studied him, her expression softening. "You're not what you seem, Mal Reynolds. Neither are you, Ellen Ripley." He stepped closer, close enough to catch the faint floral scent of her skin, exotic, like flowers blooming under alien stars. "Most folks in your shoes would be bitter, raging at the galaxy. But you're still here, still sharp. Still fighting. And you think you can give me back what I lost?" Her voice was a challenge, but her eyes held a flicker of hope. "I think," Mal said, his fingers brushing her hand, "we might be exactly what each other needs." The touch sent a jolt through them both, a spark that made Ellen's breath catch and Mal's heart thud against his ribs. For a moment, the workshop faded, leaving just the two of them in a bubble of green light and possibility. "I should go," Ellen whispered, but she didn't move. "You should," Mal agreed, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "It's late, and this is probably a terrible idea." "Definitely terrible," she said, a small smile breaking through. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow," he replied, his grin widening. "I'll need measurements, run some tests. Be here." Ellen finally pulled her hand back, but her eyes lingered, promising more than words could say. "Try not to get arrested before then," she teased as she maneuvered toward the door. "No promises," Mal called after her, watching her silhouette vanish into the night. He stood there for a long time, the hum of the workshop a steady heartbeat around him. He'd built countless gadgets, fixed impossible problems, but this felt different. This wasn't just about tech or rebellion, it was about giving someone their freedom back. And maybe, just maybe, finding something he hadn't known he'd lost. The next night came fast, too fast. Mal spent the day scavenging, his mind racing with plans for Ellen's legs. The quantum core was the key, but it was buried in the restricted military wreckage zone, a tangle of twisted battle cruisers under the twin moon's pale light. He checked his scanner, the faint beep guiding him toward his prize. "This is madness," he muttered, ducking under a jagged beam. Without that core, the neural interface would be a pipe dream, useless for Ellen's complex Zorani physiology. His wrist communicator buzzed, and Ellen's holographic image flickered to life, her white hair gleaming even in miniature. "Tell me you're not in the restricted zone," she said, her tone a mix of concern and exasperation. "Would you believe I'm just taking a midnight stroll?" Mal grinned at her image, dodging a fallen panel. "Mal, the security drones," her words cut off as he ducked behind a bulkhead, a drone searchlight sweeping past. "Flattery won't save you from plasma burns. Got a good teacher in bypassing systems," he quipped, moving deeper into the wreckage. "Besides, we're too close to quit now." Silence hung heavy, then she spoke, softer. "Be careful. I've gotten used to your reckless human charm." "Just my charm." His heart skipped, but he forced focus. The scanner led him to a shattered cruiser, its navigation bay cracked open like an egg. There it was, the quantum core, nestled in a web of fried circuits. He extracted it with trembling hands, the thrill of the find warring with the memory of Ellen's voice. A drone whined overhead, and Mal crouched low, waiting it out. When it passed, his communicator vibrated, a text from Ellen, "My quarters when you're done. No excuses." He smiled despite the danger, slipping the core into his pack and retracing his steps through the shadows. An hour later, he stood outside her quarters, heart pounding for more than just the mission. The door slid open, revealing a space bathed in soft purple light that complemented her green skin. She'd swapped her tunic for something looser, more revealing, and her eyes sparkled with relief, and something deeper. "You're late," she said, but her voice was warm. "Scenic route," Mal replied, holding up the core. "Mission accomplished." "My hero," she said, no mockery in her tone, only a quiet intensity. She moved closer, the hoverchair humming softly. "We should talk about compatibility. My species has differences." "I'm a quick study," Mal said, setting the core aside, his focus entirely on her. "And I've always believed in hands-on learning." What followed was a night of discovery, their connection transcending biology and culture. Later, as they lay tangled together, Ellen traced patterns on his chest. "The interface will work now," she murmured. "With that core, I mean." Mal kissed her temple. "Tomorrow's project. Tonight was about something else." "Indeed," she said, her smile rich and genuine. In the green glow of his workshop's memory, they'd found more than a partnership, they'd found each other. Chapter 3, The First Steps. The workshop hummed with a quiet intensity, its green plasma lights casting long shadows across the cluttered space. Weeks had passed since Mal Reynolds had retrieved the quantum core, and the air now thrummed with the faint pulse of machinery pushed to its limits. The workbench, once a chaotic sprawl of tools and scraps, now held a singular focus, a pair of robotic legs, their sleek chrome and matte black surfaces gleaming like a promise forged in metal. Mal stood over them, his leather jacket discarded on a nearby stool, sleeves rolled up as he made final adjustments with a precision that belied the tremor in his hands. Ellen Ripley lay on a makeshift examination table beside him, her hoverchair parked silently in the corner. Her silvery green skin glowed faintly under the lights, and her metallic white hair spilled over the edge of the table like liquid starlight. A thin diagnostic pad adhered to her lower back, its wires snaking to a console where streams of data scrolled in holographic bursts. She wore one of Mal's spare shirts, the dark fabric loose over her frame, a small rebellion against the sterile medical garb she'd once endured. Her black eyes followed Mal's every move, a mix of anticipation and guarded hope flickering within them. "Ready for the initial sync?" Mal asked, his voice steady despite the knot in his chest. He glanced at her, offering a crooked smile to mask his nerves. This was it, the moment he'd promised her, the moment that could change everything or break it all apart. Ellen nodded, her fingers gripping the table's edge. "I've been ready for 12 years, she said, her tone dry but edged with something raw. "Let's see if your crazy idea holds up." Mal connected the neural interface to the diagnostic pad, his fingers brushing the cool metal of the quantum core embedded in the leg's framework. The device pulsed faintly, a heartbeat of alien technology he'd wrested from the wreckage. "This is just calibration," he reminded her, his voice softening. "No movement yet. We're mapping your neural pathways first." "Yes, Doctor," Ellen teased, but her knuckles whitened against the table as the interface activated. A gentle hum filled the room, and she gasped, her eyes widening. I can feel them," she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. "They're there." Mal's gaze snapped to the console, where green lines spiked and danced as the quantum core synced with her Zorani physiology. "Neural pathways are linking," he said, a grin breaking through his focus. "How's it feel?" "Strange," Ellen breathed, closing her eyes to concentrate. "Like phantom limbs, but more real. The right one's warmer than the left." "That's the core's primary processor," Mal explained, tweaking a setting on the console. "It'll balance out once the system's fully integrated." He paused, watching her face, her parted lips, the faint flush on her cheeks. She was beautiful, even now, in this moment of raw vulnerability. He shook his head, muttering, "Focus, Mal," more to himself than her. Ellen opened her eyes, catching his slip. "Before what?" she asked, her voice taking on a playful lilt that sent heat rushing to his face. "Before you get distracted by last night?" "You're not playing fair," he shot back, fumbling with the console as memories of their recent nights together, nights of exploration and connection, flooded his mind. Their physical relationship had become a journey of its own, each touch teaching them how to bridge the gap between human and Zorani biology. "When do I ever?" Ellen leaned forward slightly, her expression shifting to something more serious. "Mal, there's something we need to talk about." The change in her tone made him look up sharply, his hands stilling. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, exactly." She bit her lip, a human gesture she'd picked up from him, endearing in its awkwardness. "My latest medical scan showed unexpected results." Mal's heart skipped, his mind racing to the interface. "The neural sync is perfect," he said, checking the readings again. "What?" "It's not that," Ellen interrupted, her hand moving to her abdomen. "It's something else. Something that, by all known xenobiology, should be impossible." Understanding dawned slowly, a wave of dizziness washing over him. "You're pregnant," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. Ellen nodded, her lips curving into a small, uncertain smile. "With what appears to be a viable human Zorani hybrid." Mal sank onto a stool, his mind reeling. "But the genetic differences, they're massive." He stared at her, then at the hand resting on her stomach, a flood of emotions, shock, joy, fear, crashing through him. "A baby. Our baby. Are you okay with this?" Ellen's voice wavered, a rare crack in her composure. "Okay with it?" Mal stood, crossing the space between them in 2 strides to take her hands in his. "Ellen, this is incredible. Impossible. Perfect." He squeezed her fingers, his grin returning full force. "The timing's not ideal, sure, with the leg project, but it's exactly right," she finished for him, relief flooding her features. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, bright against her green skin. "By the time the baby comes, I'll be walking." "You're that sure of us?" "Always," Mal said, leaning down to kiss her softly, tasting the salt of her tears. He pulled back, returning to the workbench with renewed determination. "Now let's finish this calibration. Our kid deserves to see their mom dance." The next hour passed in focused silence, broken only by the hum of the quantum core and the occasional murmur of wonder as they marveled at their shared future. Ellen's control over the robotic components grew sharper, the neural pathways strengthening with each adjustment. Mal triple-checked every connection, his hands steady now, driven by a purpose bigger than himself. "Ready to try movement?" he asked finally, his voice thick with anticipation. Ellen took a deep breath, her jaw setting with determination. "Ready." He activated the full system, and the legs hummed to life, responding to her neural commands. Slowly, carefully, they bent at the knees, then straightened. "Holy stars," Ellen whispered, watching them move. "They feel natural." "That's the quantum core," Mal said, monitoring the readings. "Adapting to your patterns like it was made for you." He moved to her side, positioning himself beside the table. "Want to try standing?" She nodded, her grip tightening on his arm as he helped her shift her weight. With excruciating slowness, she slid off the table, the robotic legs taking her full weight for the first time. They held firm, steady as stone. "I'm standing," she breathed, clutching Mal's shoulders. "After 12 years, I'm actually standing." Mal wrapped an arm around her waist, steadying her as she trembled, not from weakness, but from the sheer weight of the moment. "How's it feel?" "Like coming home," Ellen said, her voice breaking. She looked up at him, her eyes brimming with joy and something deeper, something that transcended words. "Like everything's finally right." He pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. "You're doing it, Ellen. You're walking again." "We're doing it," she corrected, her hands sliding up to cup his face. "You gave me this." They stood there, locked in each other's arms, the workshop's green light bathing them in a quiet glow. The legs were a triumph, a testament to Mal's ingenuity and Ellen's resilience, but the child growing within her was something more, a miracle that defied the galaxy's rules. For a moment, the future felt limitless, a vast expanse of possibility stretching before them. But the moment shattered with a sharp knock at the workshop door. Mal tensed, his arm tightening around Ellen as he turned toward the sound. "Stay here," he muttered, grabbing his multi-tool and crossing the room in quick strides. He cracked the door open, peering into the night. A man stood outside, his crisp uniform stark against the scrapyard's chaos. His face was hard, lined with authority, and a Weyland-Yutani insignia gleamed on his chest. "Mal Reynolds?" he asked, his voice clipped. "I'm Colonel Kane, representing the corporation. We need to talk about your project." Mal's stomach sank, his grip on the door tightening. "Not a good time," he said, keeping his tone light but firm. "Come back tomorrow." Kane's eyes flicked past him, landing on Ellen and the robotic legs. "That's not an option," he said, stepping closer. "We've heard about your neural interface, and the anomaly it's tied to. Weyland-Yutani has an interest in this technology. A significant one. It's not for sale," Mal snapped, his voice dropping to a dangerous edge. "Not to you, not to anyone. This is ours." Kane's lips thinned, but he didn't push further, not yet. "We'll see," he said, turning on his heel and vanishing into the dark. Mal shut the door, leaning against it as his heart pounded. He looked back at Ellen, who stood tall on her new legs, her expression a mix of defiance and worry. "They know," she said quietly. "About the legs, and the baby." "Yeah," Mal replied, crossing back to her side. "But they're not taking either. Not while I'm breathing." Ellen reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "Then we fight," she said, her voice steady. "Together." "Together," Mal echoed, pulling her close. The workshop's hum surrounded them, a quiet promise of the battles ahead, and the strength they'd found in each other. Chapter 4, Under the Pressure of Twin Stars. The morning sun, or suns, as Nova Crucible's twin stars rose in tandem, painted the workshop in a harsh golden glow, filtering through the grimy windows to dance across the robotic legs that had become Ellen Ripley's lifeline. 6 months had passed since that first triumphant stand, and now, as Mal Reynolds adjusted the neural interface's sensitivity, the changes in Ellen were impossible to ignore. Her silvery green skin stretched subtly over a growing belly, a gentle curve that seemed to defy the galaxy's laws as much as the legs themselves. She stood near the workbench, one hand braced against its edge, the other resting protectively on her abdomen, her metallic white hair cascading over her shoulders like a shimmering veil. Mal muttered under his breath, his eyes fixed on the diagnostic readouts flickering across a holographic display. "Hormonal shifts are messing with the neural pathways," he said, his voice tight with focus. "The interface needs to adapt faster than we planned." He tapped a command into the console, his fingers deft despite the faint sheen of sweat on his brow. The quantum core hummed within the legs, its pulse quickening as it struggled to keep pace with Ellen's evolving biology. Ellen took a careful step, the robotic legs responding smoothly despite a millisecond delay that made her wince. "My body's changing faster than the core can handle," she observed, her tone calm but laced with a scientist's curiosity. "Weight distribution shifts every day. It's fascinating, really, our child's already rewriting the rules." Mal nodded, making a minute adjustment to the core's settings. "The learning algorithm's impressive, but it wasn't built for this kind of flux. We need to tweak the base code." He glanced at her, a grin tugging at his lips despite the tension. "Leave it to our kid to throw a wrench in my tech before they're even born." Ellen's laugh was soft, a sound that still caught Mal off guard with its warmth. "You make it sound so clinical," she teased, taking another deliberate step toward him, her movements graceful even with the slight hitch. "When really, you're just trying to keep up with your child's chaos." The words, "our child," sent a thrill through him, a jolt of pride and wonder that hadn't dulled since the revelation. A human Zorani hybrid, a living impossibility, growing stronger each day. He caught her hand as she passed, pulling her gently into his arms, mindful of her balance. "Speaking of keeping up," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "we need to talk about the business proposition." Ellen's expression turned thoughtful, her black eyes searching his. "The legitimate salvage operation license," she said, nodding. "You're serious about this?" "Dead serious." He rested his hands on her hips, steadying her as she leaned into him. "We can't raise a kid on illegal runs and midnight scavenging. I've got the tech know-how, you've got the inventory smarts. We could build something real, legal, stable. A warehouse on the commercial side of the yard, proper equipment, the works." Ellen's fingers traced patterns on his chest, a habit that never failed to distract him. "I rather enjoyed your midnight adventures," she purred, pressing closer, her voice a playful challenge. "Especially the results." "Focused woman," Mal murmured, unable to resist kissing her forehead. "But I found a place, big enough for a lab, a shop, even a little corner for us. For the three of us." Her gaze softened, her hand pausing over his heart. "What happened to my rebellious human?" "He fell in love with an incredible woman and made an impossible kid," Mal said, capturing her wandering hand. "Now he wants a future worth giving them." Ellen's smile was radiant, tears glistening in her eyes, a human trait she'd adopted more with each passing month. "You've already given me so much," she said, demonstrating with a small spin that would have been unthinkable half a year ago. The legs whirred softly, keeping her steady. "Freedom, Mal. You showed me limitations are just challenges waiting to be broken. And you showed me some rules are worth keeping," he replied, his grin widening. "Some." A warning light flashed on the diagnostic panel, cutting their moment short. Ellen stumbled slightly, the neural interface flickering as she caught herself against the workbench. "Damn," Mal muttered, rushing to her side to ease her onto a stool. "Hormone surge is stronger today. Give me a minute to recalibrate." "It's incredible," Ellen mused, watching him work. "Our child's changing my neural patterns, literally. The doctors say it's the hybrid genetics, adapting my body to human DNA. Humans are notorious for forcing adaptation," Mal said, adjusting the quantum core's settings with a deft hand. "It's kind of our thing." "Indeed." Ellen's voice turned husky, a playful edge creeping in. "I've certainly enjoyed adapting to your particular traits." Mal nearly dropped his tool, a flush creeping up his neck. "You're impossible," he said, his tone fond. "Pregnant or not, you're relentless." "My hormones are perfectly justified," she countered, stretching languidly, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Besides, the doctor said intimacy helped stabilize the neural patterns." Did they now?" Mal raised an eyebrow, fighting a grin. "And this has nothing to do with your species' legendary appetite during pregnancy?" "Pure medical necessity," Ellen insisted, her smile widening. "For the interface, of course." "Of course." Mal finished the calibration and helped her stand, steadying her as she tested the legs. "Better?" Ellen took a few experimental steps, then executed a perfect twirl, her laughter ringing through the workshop. "Much. Though I might need extra stabilization later, you know, for science." "Minx," Mal said, his voice warm with affection. "Let's focus on the business plan first. I've got prelim designs for the warehouse conversion, want to see?" They spent the next hour poring over plans, their professional focus derailed by playful touches and lingering glances. The future they envisioned felt tangible, a legitimate operation, a home for their child, a legacy built from scrap and stubborn hope. "We'll need to register this week," Mal said, pulling up forms on his tablet. "Get it locked in before the baby arrives." 5 months, Ellen murmured, her hand resting on her belly. "It doesn't seem possible." "Says the woman walking on quantum-powered legs while carrying a hybrid kid," Mal teased, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his hands covering hers. "We specialize in impossible." The peace shattered that afternoon when Colonel Kane returned. Mal spotted him through the workshop window, his uniform pristine, flanked by 2 armed guards, their boots kicking up black sand as they approached. "Stay back," Mal told Ellen, grabbing his multi-tool and stepping outside to meet them. "Reynolds," Kane said, his voice clipped, eyes flicking to the workshop. "We've reconsidered our position. That tech, and the child, represent a breakthrough Weyland-Yutani can't ignore. We're prepared to offer funding, facilities, protection." "Not interested," Mal said, planting himself in the doorway. "This isn't your sandbox. Back off." Kane's gaze hardened. "You're making a mistake. Others will come, ones who won't ask nicely. Then they'll regret it," Mal shot back, his hand tightening on the tool. "Leave." Kane lingered, then signaled his men to retreat, their figures vanishing into the scrapyard's maze. Mal returned inside, finding Ellen standing tall, her robotic legs steady despite the tension in her eyes. "They're not giving up," she said. "No," Mal agreed, pulling a console to activate the workshop's defenses, quantum-powered drones he'd rigged after Kane's first visit. "But neither are we." That night, after the adrenaline faded, Ellen pulled Mal into the workshop's open space. "Dance with me," she said, her voice soft but insistent. He blinked, caught off guard. "Now. Now." She tugged him closer, her hands finding his. "We're building something incredible, let's feel it." Unable to resist, Mal guided her into a slow waltz, the green lights casting their shadows across the walls. The legs moved flawlessly, the quantum core syncing with her every step. "Remember our first dance," she murmured, her breath warm against his neck. "When you got the calibration right?" "You said it felt like flying," Mal replied, supporting her through a gentle turn. Then proceeded to prove it with that zero-gravity stunt. "You turned such a lovely shade of green," she teased, matching his grin. Their laughter mingled, a balm against the day's strain, and for a few precious minutes, the galaxy's pressures melted away. Later, curled together on a makeshift couch, another essential addition to the workshop, Ellen traced his jawline. "We're stronger than they think," she said, her voice firm. "This family, this tech, it's ours." "Damn right," Mal said, kissing her palm. "They can try, but they won't break us." Outside, the twin stars sank low, their light glinting off the scrapyard's jagged edges. Inside, Mal and Ellen held each other, their unborn child a quiet force between them, driving them forward under the pressure of a galaxy that refused to let them rest. Chapter 5, A New Star's Light. The workshop had transformed into a sanctuary, a fusion of human ingenuity and alien grace glowing softly under the twin moons of Nova Crucible. The private lab, once a cluttered nook of half-finished projects, now housed a birthing suite meticulously crafted by Mal Reynolds' hands. The specialized chair at its center hummed with a gentle pulse, its neural interface seamlessly integrated with Ellen Ripley's robotic legs, a testament to months of relentless refinement. Diagnostic screens lined the walls, their holographic displays flickering with streams of data, while a faint purple light, Ellen's touch to the space, bathed everything in a serene glow. Outside, the scrapyard lay silent, its jagged edges softened by night, but within these walls, the air crackled with anticipation. Ellen stood beside the birthing chair, her silvery green skin taut over her swollen belly, now 8 months heavy with the impossible child she and Mal had created. Her metallic white hair hung loose, framing a face etched with determination and a trace of nervous excitement. The robotic legs, sleek and unwavering, supported her with a fluidity that still felt like a miracle. Mal hovered nearby, his leather jacket swapped for a clean shirt, his gray eyes darting between Ellen and the screens. He was no longer just a rebel tinkerer, he was a father-to-be, and the weight of that role pressed against his chest like a second heartbeat. "The neural interface is holding steady," Mal announced, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands as he checked the readings. "The baby's bioelectric field is stabilizing the quantum core, stronger than ever. Ellen breathed through a contraction, her hand gripping the chair's armrest. "Our son knows what he's doing," she said, a faint smile breaking through the strain. "Already taking after his father's technical flair." Mal chuckled, the sound a lifeline in the tension. "Or his mother's knack for keeping me on my toes." He moved to her side, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "The medical team's ready, human and Zorani specialists, best I could find. They're still amazed you're standing through this." The team, a carefully chosen handful, moved with quiet efficiency around them, their faces a mix of awe and focus. The adaptive neural interface had upended their understanding of what was possible, allowing Ellen to remain mobile even in active labor. Mal glanced at a secondary screen, his free hand never leaving hers. "Security grids active," he reported. "Perimeter drones are running silent protocols. No one's getting near this place without us knowing." After Colonel Kane's last visit, they'd fortified the workshop with cutting-edge defenses, quantum-powered drones and sensors woven from the same tech that drove Ellen's legs. Weyland-Yutani's interest had grown sharper, their whispers of hybrid research and neural breakthroughs reaching Mal through back channels. He'd made it clear, this was their fight, their terms, starting with this birth. Ellen's grip tightened as another contraction hit, but her voice remained steady. "Dance with me," she said, her tone carrying that familiar command that always stirred his heart. "What?" Mal blinked, caught off guard. "Love, you're in labor." "And I'm standing on legs you built," she countered, pulling him closer. "About to deliver our impossible child. Dance with me while we wait, show them what we've made together." He couldn't refuse her, not now, not ever. Mal took her hands, guiding her into a slow, intimate waltz across the lab's open floor. The medical team paused, watching in quiet amazement as the robotic legs adapted perfectly, the quantum core harmonizing with Ellen's movements and the strengthening bioelectric field of their child. Her belly pressed against him, a warm weight between them, and Mal felt the faint kick of life within, a spark that mirrored the rhythm of their steps. "Remember our first dance?" Ellen murmured, her breath warm against his neck. "When you got the calibration right?" "You said it felt like flying," Mal replied, supporting her through a gentle turn as another contraction rippled through her. "Then dragged me into that zero-gravity waltz. Turned me greener than your skin." Her laughter mingled with a soft groan, her hands tightening on his shoulders. "You matched me perfectly," she said, her eyes locking with his. "Still do." Their dance slowed as the contractions grew closer, and the team stepped in, guiding Ellen to the birthing chair. Mal stayed by her side, his hand clasped in hers as the neural interface synced seamlessly with the chair's systems. What followed was a birth unlike any in recorded history, human or Zorani. The room filled with a gentle glow as the quantum core resonated, amplifying the baby's bioelectric surge. Ellen pushed, her legs steady, her face a mask of fierce resolve softened by love. Mal whispered encouragements, his voice a steady anchor through her pain. Their son entered the world with a cry that echoed like a chime, bathed in the pulsing light of the quantum tech. His skin shimmered a faint green, shifting subtly in the glow, and his fine hair held hints of Ellen's white and Mal's brown. But his eyes, wide and bright, like twin galaxies, captured everyone's breath. The medical team froze, awestruck, as every device in the room hummed in harmony, responding to the child's presence. "He's perfect," Mal whispered, cradling the boy as the team cut the cord. He handed him to Ellen, who reached out with trembling arms, her robotic legs still supporting her as she stood from the chair moments after birth. "Jin," she said softly, naming him after the Zorani word for bridge between stars. "Our bridge." Mal leaned in, kissing her temple, then Jin's tiny forehead. "Perfect," he repeated, his voice thick with tears he didn't bother to hide. Hours later, with the medical team gone and the security drones humming their silent vigil, the new family settled into their quarters above the lab. Ellen walked the room with natural grace, Jin cradled against her chest, his tiny breaths a quiet rhythm against her heartbeat. Mal sat at a console, making final adjustments to the quantum field stabilizers, his eyes darting between his work and the sight of his wife and son. The adaptive algorithms evolved again, he noted, studying the readings. Jin's bioelectric signature, it's integrating into the base code. He's part of the system keeping you walking. Of course he is, Ellen said, smiling down at their sleeping son. He's part of us, human determination, Zorani adaptability. The best of both. Mal crossed to them, wrapping his arms around them both, marveling at how perfectly they fit. The medical patents are secure, he murmured. Production starting soon, anyone who needs this tech will get it. Military and corporate types are managed through our partners. They won't touch us. Ellen nodded, her voice firm. Our innovations are protected, not restricted. Jin's legacy, and ours. Speaking of innovations, Mal said, his hands wandering appreciatively over her curves, the interface's sensitivity is still responsive. Ellen's eyes sparkled with familiar mischief. Perhaps we should test it thoroughly, once Jin settled. For science, naturally. Naturally, Mal agreed, his grin widening as he kissed her, slow and deep. They stood together, Jin a warm weight between them, proof that boundaries were meant to be crossed, that limitations were just challenges for the stubborn to conquer. The next morning brought resolution. A delegation from the Galactic Alliance arrived, summoned by Mal's network of allies, engineers, scientists, and fringe dwellers who'd rallied to their cause. Colonel Kane's threats had reached them, but so had the story of Ellen's legs and Jin's birth. The Alliance representatives, stern but fair, reviewed the patents and the hybrid's unprecedented neural compatibility. This changes everything, one said, her voice hushed. Prosthetics, human-machine integration, it's revolutionary. It's for everyone, Mal insisted, standing beside Ellen, who held Jin in her arms. No corporate gatekeeping. The Alliance agreed, issuing a decree that shielded their work from Weyland-Yutani's grasp. Kane's final message, a curt withdrawal, arrived that evening, leaving them free at last. As night fell, the family stood by the quarters window, gazing out at the scrapyard where their story began. The twin suns had set, replaced by a sky ablaze with stars, their light glinting off the wreckage below. Jin stirred, his tiny hand grasping Mal's finger with surprising strength, a grip that held the future. Ellen leaned into Mal, her robotic legs steady, her voice a whisper. Thank you, Mal. For seeing past my chair that first day. For believing I could walk. Thank you, Mal replied, his arm tightening around her. For showing me the best salvage isn't in the yard, it's in the connections we forge, the boundaries we break, the love we build. Outside, the Nova Crucible stretched into the darkness, a graveyard of discarded dreams still brimming with possibility. But the real treasure was here, in this room, a family born of determination and innovation, lit by the light of a new star they'd brought into the galaxy together. And so, we've journeyed through the remarkable saga of Mal Reynolds and Ellen Ripley, a tale that began in the windswept scrapyard of Nova Crucible, where a human rebel and a Zorani engineer defied the odds with robotic legs, forged an unbreakable love, and welcomed Jin, their miraculous hybrid son, into a galaxy forever changed by their courage and ingenuity. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to support us in hitting 1,000 subscribers as soon as possible. Your encouragement is the heartbeat of Sci-Fi Nebula, driving us to share even more incredible stories with you. See you in the next adventure among the stars.